My name is Sally Sandler. For a long time, I've been hooked on 20th century modern art because it has so much depth and character, in particular, mid-century modern. I believe that a work of modern art gives you something new or different to think about each time you look at it. And I discovered I can create it too by using the camera as my medium. Here on the cover of my portfolio is one example. In my process, I concentrate on urban settings in San Diego for subject matter. I scout around for interesting architectural shapes, reflections in doors and windows, rust, and different types of urban decay. And then I transform those things into original fine art that's modern, expressive, sometimes moody, and often abstract. They form the basis of this portfolio entitled Urban Abstractions. Would you like to add some excitement or depth to your home or office environment? Let me show you what I mean by taking a quick trip through my portfolio. It begins with my artist statement, as well as names of the photographers, both past and present, who inspire me. You might ask, why do I care about 20th century modern art? Well, it's for two reasons. First, as a baby boomer, this is the generation I grew up in. I was steeped in this art. But also, as with all art history in the Western world, that art was an expression of what was happening to our world and in our time. It was the voice of our culture. And like our culture, our art, both in the built environment and the fine arts, took a hard left turn away from the traditions and norms of the past and explored a whole new way of seeing things, a new reality. And I believe that still speaks to much of our culture today. So Urban Abstractions is a collection of images from the streets of San Diego. These images are grouped based on elements of specific art movements that influenced my shots. A bit of explanation is called for along the way. The first group references Cubism, which was made popular by Picasso, and breaks down subjects into geometric fractured shapes and planes and often distorted points of view. And there's also Impressionism, a style that emphasizes the artist's subjective perception instead of objective photographic accuracy. Next, now let's step into my virtual gallery and I'll give you a mini tour of modern art. Sidewalk is a multi-layered city view, a view of fractured shapes and colors. We can distinguish shapes that oddly resemble almost boats and faint images of people. Even layered against a background of buildings is a glimpse of a large industrial crane. Faces is another layered street view on several planes. Here's a lampshade kind of floating or hanging on the street, a menu suspended above the car, the hint of a man walking behind the woman with his head down, and the woman looking straight at us, expressionless or maybe doubtful. This is also a happy play on the complementary colors of orange and blue. Blues illustrates that fractured view again, showing various planes and distorted shapes of these buildings. And there's that same industrial crane hovering in the background. I'm really drawn to all these different shades of blue, again with the contrasting or complementary orange. Especially the indigo blue on this gas lamp, which is a defining feature in the gas lamp in downtown San Diego. And with 5 flags, we get to see that actual crane itself. Here it has a ruptured, almost ghostly or spectral appearance, kind of emotional. And the 5 flags, when you find them, appear to droop in dismay. Trolley is an example of impressionist art. Moody and hazy due to the raindrops, all the edges are softened by the blur, and the moment is almost dreamlike. The art of photographing through rain was a popular subject for photographer Saul Leiter, who repeated this effect in his 1950s shots in New York. And last in this group is drapes, which is all about light and shape. Those repeating rectangular shapes. The sunlight creates rectangles as it falls on the gauzy curtains, and the overall illumination creates a dreamy effect. The next group of images could be considered abstract, which uses color, shape, and form and line to create something that focuses on emotion and expression rather than any kind of realism. And here I take a moment to include some quotes from my favorite photographers, both past and present, that guide my own view, although I'll let you read those another time. Opening draws on repeating lines and shapes that create a balanced, symmetrical view with leading lines that direct your eye to this opening that appears to go nowhere, or at least into the mist. Rust 1 is a classic abstract composition based almost completely on color and design. Note again my signature orange and blue complementary colors, and the scalloped lines and shapes that almost appear to be bubbling up through some kind of dark liquid. Rust 2 is much more structured, bringing our attention to the repeating squiggly column shapes here, these vertical lines, and contrasting with random spots of rust and decay. Waterfall references the prominent mid-century photographer Aaron Siskind, who explored textures, lines, and designs that he found on crude surfaces like walls and floors and streets. You can imagine a waterfall here, or you can also get lost in these various shapes and cracks and weird textures on the left. And cherries is along the same line. You can concentrate on many different things in this image. The rough gray texture your eye leads to, the play of red and blue primary colors, and yellow, and the tease of the incomplete writing, words that are hidden enough to be only guessed at. Self-portrait begs you to find the photographer, me, amongst these bizarre stretched and contorted shapes and colors in a mashup. And here's a hint. Downtown jazz reflects the lively feeling of nighttime in San Diego with its pulsing, repeating notes, fluid and colorful all at once, as if sound were illustrated on a sonogram or a graph of some kind. And with static, we experience geometric shapes, repeating patterns, and streaks of light against a black background. The intersections of those white bars look almost lit up, and the overall composition is kind of uncomfortable. Last, we have the final group that relates to brutalism. This style in architecture is most famously seen in San Diego at the Salk Institute, and also all of the architecture on the Muir campus at UCSD. In photography, it's a style that focuses on geometric, concrete, steel, and brick structures. It often highlights raw textures, massive, blocky forms, and almost surreal composition. By the way, brutalism is another example of art mirroring life. It arose in the built environment and in fine arts during the Cold War, when we wanted to project a feeling of strength and power and create a sense of being protected by a fortress. Parallelograms is a quintessential example of geometry and architecture that floods us with the contrast between those shapes and the diagonal lines on both sides. In black and white composition, these massive sculptures contrast with the diminutive woman on the lower right, and with the delicate light shining through these windows at the top. The darkness and the dramatic lighting, I think, create kind of an almost modern Gothic feel. With one man, we have a perfect example of brutalism. The massive dark concrete sculptures appear looming and almost foreboding, compared to the vulnerable-looking but seemingly unaware man seen walking in the lower right. In the battle between concrete and human, the concrete wins. This is also an example of minimalism in photography, where the subject is reduced to very, very few elements. Now, curve, like you saw on the cover, is raw brutalism. It features muscular, dark geometric shapes. These curves contrast sharply with the rectangles on the side, on the right, and there's a feeling of bulk with an almost hypnotic, surreal aspect to these curving lines. Next is Climb, featuring this sort of ascent that leads with gentle lighting and seems to go on forever. Again, consisting of repetition, of pattern, and the edges look almost delicate. Now, I usually don't share where and how I captured an abstract image in order to maintain its abstract quality, but here I confess I was really excited to find these components. What you see is actually an orange fence structure that's been flipped onto its side and turned monochrome. In other words, these are actually bright orange fence posts concealing some apparatus that was on the side of the Manchester Grand Hyatt Hotel in downtown San Diego. Last is Bridge, and here we have architecture that most San Diegans are familiar with, the Coronado Bay Bridge. Normally, it's a luminous, arched, and airy structure, but here it has an eerie quality, threatening and dramatic, because I've revealed the crude-looking industrial components that support it underneath. On the last page, I've included the links this time to those past and present photographers whose art influences and inspires me, and whom you may also enjoy. And here I've added my website and my email so we can stay in touch. I hope you've enjoyed this mini modern art tour with me. Thank you very much.